This week on To the Contrary, first, two visions for the future, one from the Republicans, one more from the Democrats. Our panel will discuss it. Then, an interview with Shelley Moore Capito, the Republican senator from West Virginia. Welcome to the Contrary, a weekly discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, women and the 2020 election. Joining me now are two longtime To the Contrary panelists, DC Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's not only a member of Congress, but certainly the most famous woman who began her activism in the civil rights movement in the 60s, and who has been a major part of that movement up until now. And welcome to you, Eleanor. And of course, Tara Setmayer, who started with us, 20 some odd years ago, and is now a big timer and part of the Lincoln Project and longtime Republican conservative. And she has her own podcast called Honestly Speaking with Tara Setmayer. So both of you, welcome. Let's start out with the Republican convention, now over. But at least for the first couple of nights, it was getting completely obliterated by what was going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the shooting there and the murders there. And of course, the hurricane. So first, let's start with you, Tara. Did the convention, do you think, make much of an impression to lure independents, some of whom are still making up their minds, back into the Trump fold?
Well, I think the fact that the convention was so unconventional in the way it was put on, and using the White House in violation of the Hatch Act and really politicizing certain things like immigration, naturalization services, and pardons. And I just felt that there was a certain amount of just political expediency that the president was using, because most people can see that he's been an adversary for legal immigration in this country. He hasn't, those are people, you look at that and you say, wait a minute, it's clearly just political pageantry. The parts of it also that I thought were a bit untoward that would turn off independents, the first night where you had Kimberly Guilfoyle screaming at the audience in a way that was just very unbecoming, and the doom and gloom, very dark warnings about how America is going to be turned upside down and our way of life destroyed if the Democrats win. I just don't see that positive message that independents would resonate with. However, when you see what happens in places like Kenosha, where you had looting and rioting again, albeit in response to a tragic event, that helps Trump's message. And the Democrats, and particularly Biden and Harris ticket, must come out and condemn looting and violence in response to racial injustice, because that just gives them credence to this law and order dark picture that they're in chaos that they're trying to portray in America. So it was on both sides there are issues going on here that need to be that people have to pay attention to after this convention.
Congresswoman, your thoughts?
In commandeering the White House for a political event, the president surely must have hurt himself with the independence you ask about. Not only in violation of the Hatch Act, but a clear sign that he's in trouble. And we know he's in trouble, 8 to 10 points behind. So he thinks if he surrounds himself with the trappings of the White House, he will get the White House. I think he does not understand independence very well. He knew that wouldn't work with us. I would be interested to know whether it will work with Republicans as well, but it does show desperation that virtually all of last night was with official surroundings in violation of every protocol, not to mention statute, that we have.
Tara, you have been an anti-Trump Republican since he first running for office, and when he first started to look like a possibility, because as we all know, at the very beginning, it was a joke. People were laughing about running for president. But one area where he's really, really having trouble is with white women, married white suburban moms. And of course, Melania, on the second night of the convention, she spoke. Is she a help to him with these women or not?
I've got to be honest. I just don't think she really is a help. She has been an absentee first lady. It's clear that she's miserable in the position. Their relationship is very dysfunctional. I don't think it's relatable to average women out there, in their suburban households, or the suburban, quote, housewives that Trump thinks that he's speaking to. It's just absolutely not relatable. She polls well with the people who already support him, his rabid base of the 30-35%. There's a reason why Trump is 20 points underwater with these women, with that demographic. Because they see they see Melania swatting his hand away when they're walking from official events at times. They see that she's supposed to be part of this Be Best campaign against cyberbullying, but she's married to the biggest cyberbully in the world, and it hasn't had any impact whatsoever. So she has no credibility in that respect. It's laughable. And when it's important for her to speak out on the issues of racial justice, or on other issues that are supposed to soften this president and try to give some credence to that they care about folks, she's only done it once, and that was during a very scripted and probably very focus group speech during the convention, where that was nice to hear from her, to acknowledge first frontline workers in the COVID-19 crisis, and to acknowledge the racial injustice protests that are going on. But when you're doing it, when you're basically forced to do it, you can't not speak at the convention for your husband. It comes across as disingenuous. So I really don't think she's that much of an asset at this point to this administration, because she's really been an absent first lady.
Eleanor?
Well, she can't make up for the absence of women public officials. You would expect her to speak at some point. And she's benign. She doesn't help him. She doesn't hurt him. People don't usually go after the wife. But if you are, and I agree with Kara, 20 points behind with women gave us the House of Representatives back. Mm-hmm. Women is where his deficit is. Where were those women senators? Where were those women members of the House who have some credibility? His deficit, he can't overcome his deficit with women, with Melania.
And yet a record number of women win in the 2018 midterms in response to the dissatisfaction in the suburban districts to the Trump presidency. I mean, women are the majority percentage of voters in this country. And I really believe that women voters are going to make the difference in these swing states. And if they don't make up that difference, that could be fatal for the Trump campaign because of how close it was last time. They can't afford to be losing women by 20 percentage points.
And what about the fact that the RNC chair is a woman? And this is not the first time. They've had at least two co-chairs. Patricia Harrison, now head of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, was one. And there was a very famous one. I'm sorry, my memory escapes me at the moment. But back in the 80s, first female chair or co-chair of the RNC. Why aren't they promoting that? Because the chair of the DNC is a man.
Because they know it's tokenism. People can see right through it. And when you have the female chair of the RNC trying to convince people that Donald Trump is a family man, it just comes across as not credible. It just strains credulity, and people see right through that. So it's difficult to square the words coming out of the mouths of some of the women who are acolytes of the president versus his record and his own behavior toward women.
Eleanor, what do the Republicans need to do now, if you think that they can do anything, to pull it out? I mean, the numbers always tighten running up to an election. But one thing that is very different this year is mail-in balloting and early voting. I personally am early voting in Virginia, one of many states allowing you to walk in to a most often empty registrar's office or vote or polling place and vote before early November. How is the fact that the polls are favoring Biden-Harris now, more likely than they will be on election day, going to change the whole tenor of this election?
It's almost impossible to think of someone who could turn around this many points behind. He's hoping that some kind of miracle cure from coronavirus will do it. Bonnie, I'm pleased to hear you say you're early voting. I am advising my constituents, don't depend on the mails. Even if we do our best on mail-in voting, and we have done very well in the past on mail voting, we have never had mail voting under these circumstances, with so many ballots coming in and with the President of the United States trying to discredit your mail vote even before it is received. So the notion of going to the polls is the best way to solve this dilemma.
Tara, you're a founding member of the Lincoln Project, of course, co-founded by George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband, who has resigned from that position as she has resigned from the White House. What do you think about how early voting and mail-in voting could change the outcome of this election, even if the polls tighten to neck and neck by November?
Yeah, it's, at the Lincoln Project, we are definitely focused on making sure that people can vote, that we point out where voter suppression efforts are happening in some of the ads and some of the efforts that we've put together. Our women's coalition in the Lincoln Project that was just recently formed. We have women leaders all across the country who are making sure that getting out the information about how to vote early, where to make sure you're registered, that's happening in local jurisdictions. And I think that the attack on the mail system blew up in their faces because of the righteous anger of the American people saying, wait a minute, you're locking our mailboxes, you're taking our mailboxes off the street, and our postal workers who, can't work overtime, you're removing mail sorting machines before the most important election in 100 years, where mail-in balloting is crucial because of the COVID-19 crisis that is still raging in this country. They're trying to set up this predicate to dispute the results of the election if it's close, which is why it needs to be a landslide.
All right. Thank you both so much, my friends. And it's going to be, whatever happens, it's going to be a heck of a Bronco ride between now and whenever our next president is in office. Thank you both.
All right.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Good to see you again, Bonnie.
And joining me now is Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia. Welcome, Senator, and good to see you again.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thanks for having me on.
Happy to. So tell me, West Virginia is trending red, but has been sort of purple in the past. What do you see? How do you see West Virginia voters voting in the presidential race this fall?
Well, I think that President Trump remains very popular in the state of West Virginia, and I expect that he will handily take our state. But our state, you're right in describing, we are thought to be red, and we do have our federal delegation, except for Senator Manchin, are all Republicans, but we still have a voter registration benefit to the Democrats. So we have a little bit of local politics that changes, but I do believe President Trump will win handily.
What do you think the biggest issue for President Trump is in West Virginia? Is it guns? Is it the evangelical vote with being anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ equality?
No, actually, what I think it is over the 8 years of the Obama administration, our coal industry really suffered mightily, and our economics just cratered. And it just appeared to all of us here, understanding that coal has challenges, that they didn't care. And then President Trump, when he campaigned, he made that part of his platform was to help those forgotten men and women in the coal industry and other industries. So it is better, and it's better than it was. And I think it's more of a feeling that the president has promised he'd be tough on China, promised he'd protect Second Amendment, and that's what he's done. So I think that being true to what his platform was originally has been, I think, a way to sort of seal the deal with West Virginians.
Are there any issues where you differ with him?
Well, I mean, every time we have a president of the same party doesn't mean we always agree, that's for sure. I think most of the policies that the president's moved forward, I've agreed on the economic policies. We saw a lot of growth here pre-pandemic. I have voiced concerns more than a few times about some of the tone and some of the theatrics, I think, sometimes that the president brings, which he would argue is very successful. I might disagree with the technique. And so, in terms of policies right now, I think it's more nipping around the edges and how to get to a place rather than the main issues. I think I pretty much agree with what the president has done and would do in the future.
And one big issue for you is broadband, because you are such a rural state and because very mountainous, and because of lack of access in the higher areas, the highlands. Where does he come down on this, and where do you come down on this?
Well, this has been a real frustration for me. When I first became as senator, I started the Senate Rural Broadband Caucus, bipartisan group. I mean, Senator Klobuchar is on there, Senator King. There's a lot of us because we all have rural areas. And the digital divide was just getting greater and greater. So we've prevailed upon the administration, as we did the Obama administration before, to increase programs like USDA Reconnect, talked with the FCC commissioners and making sure that the dollars that are going for broadband development are actually going to unserved and underserved areas, improvement of the maps. And then when we see the pandemic and we see telehealth and teleeducation and teleworking, and some of our people are stranded without service, it really, I think, re-emphasizes the bold measures we need to take. Has it been enough for me? No, because not until we serve that last house is it going to be enough for me. But we have had some good successes here in expanding it. I have a program called Capito Connect, and we work on it all the time.
Is that in any way related to rural electrification, which, as I understand it, still is an issue in West Virginia, the Appalachian Regional Commission, or whatever the newer name for it is? Please tell me.
The ARC is the Appalachian Regional Commission, which moves to get resources to underdeveloped parts of Appalachia, which is actually a large, West Virginia is in all of it, but there's a lot of other states. But it's interesting you bring the rural electrification, because under USDA, remember that was rural development. That's where that plan went out 100 years ago. So that's the same mechanism. Since we're all electrified now, we're using that same mechanism to try to get out broadband through USDA. That's why agriculture has a big part of this. And our electric cooperatives have participated because they are going out into areas that are so remote, and maybe customers that had a tough time getting service, certainly getting internet service. They've been able to deploy these federal dollars like that. So that's been very, very helpful.
One area the president has problems with, we all know, is suburban white women who were, he won women in 2016. He won white women and he won white married women. But this time, not so sure what particularly suburban moms are trending against the president this time, because among many other things of the theatrics that, as you called it, but some would say is very harsh, is very angry. You see a lot more pictures of him even on Fox News, so not the liberal media, but even on Fox News, he's got an angry, horrible looking face, and he walks around like that a lot. One time I noticed that he didn't do that was when his wife spoke to the convention on Tuesday night. He was smiling. It was kind of shocking to see him smile. Does he need to do more of that to soften up for suburban white moms?
Well, I do think that my mention of the tone is one of the areas that certainly is difficult for a lot of suburban moms. I mean, I equate it to, my children are older now, but, I spent a lot of years teaching them to be kind and teaching them to be respectful of people that either aren't as blessed as they are or have other sorts of issues, and to be understanding. I tell you this, the president is a very good listener. He listens to people, and he, I think, has the heart to want to try to fix these things. He doesn't. I think he hasn't changed since he was campaigning in certain terms of tweeting. For those viewers who have seen the play Hamilton, where Burr tells Hamilton to talk less, smile more, I kind of went off on that and said, the president, tweet less, smile more. and I think that would be a welcoming sight. But his personality, I mean, we elect personalities, and his personality, I think is the real deal. We know how he feels all the time, and I think that is a good thing. And you can make your calculations from there.
Senator, also, another thing I noticed when Melania Trump was speaking in the Rose Garden was the White House staff or whoever was in the audience, were all sitting right next to each other with no masks. And even when you're outside, according to at least Maryland, the state where I spend a lot of time, in Virginia where I live, you're supposed to have a mask if you're not socially distancing, even outside. Did that surprise you at all? And how did you feel about that image being sent to the whole country?
Well, I mean, obviously, our governor has been very strict on the mask policy. It's not too far away from where I am. Always have it near me. And I've been wearing it I was just at an event earlier this morning where we all wore it, even outside, even though we were 6 feet apart, because it's respectful, not just for us, but for our community. I know that having been with the vice president last week, everybody in those rooms are tested before they go. And I guess they made a calculation, since they'd been tested, that they didn't need to wear the mask. I think it would have been better if they'd been wearing the mask, but that was a calculation that they probably made based on the test.
Black Lives Matter. What is your feeling about that issue, and how is President Trump doing on that issue in West Virginia, which has not a lot of people of color as compared with some other states?
Yeah, we do have a smaller population, but that doesn't make it any less important. Certainly think Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. It breaks your heart to see families of fathers who have children who have been, lost their lives or shot in the pursuit. And those things need to be adjudicated, and those things cannot stand as an accepted practice, obviously. That's why we tried to do our prison reform bill in the Senate, which we met with furious opposition on, which I still don't understand why that couldn't have been a very, very good first step for us. So I think that's as important in a rural area that has a smaller minority population, to make sure that we're caring and loving for our neighbors.
Melania Trump, is she somebody who helps gain the support for the president of suburban white moms, or not?
I think she does. I mean, I think she's a naturally shy person. I've actually been at public events with her. She came to West Virginia to talk to mothers addicted to opioids and how they're caring for their babies and how they're managing their families. She has a very warm touch and a very genuine heart that she moves forward with. But I think she is shy. And the other thing I would say, I would never underestimate what kind of influence she has on her husband. I think we've said this through the years as we looked at all first ladies, and someday maybe first man, that a spouse is going to have a lot of influence on that person, because in a lot of ways the presidency is very isolating. And so I do think that Melania helps a lot, but she does it her own way, and I have great respect for that. She has to be her own person. I was trying to think the other day, what should I wear for this photo? And my daughter, I was talking to her on the phone, and she goes, why don't you wear something you like? And I'm thinking, yeah, that's a good idea. So I think she sort of goes with that kind of philosophy.
And one last question you brought to mind, Kamala Harris, a colleague of yours in the Senate. What do you think of her, and what do you think of her addition to the Democratic ticket?
I think that Kamala Harris is very talented, and I consider her a friend, a work friend, but I think her policies are way off the mark, and I don't think she's quite cemented what her policies are. I mean, we saw during her presidential run, she said, yes, we could get rid of all private insurance. No, we couldn't get rid of all private insurance. So I think that's a big question for me as a policy, but I think there's no doubt that the policies that they're pursuing, they certainly don't fly here in West Virginia, that's for sure.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Republican of West Virginia. And that's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Please follow me on Twitter and go to our webpage, which is pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more. PBS.